Welcome, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I am Laura Batliner, and I'm with Magnet Culture. Welcome to today's webinar. I am so excited that we've got such a good crowd today. We are going to talk about why staff can't figure it out on their own, the decline of critical thinking in the workplace. This has been a hot topic. I know Cara and I have met with countless people who have discussed these types of issues. And we're just going to dive in today about some ways that you can tackle that with your employers or with your employees and your frontline members, because it spans all across the workforce. It's not just our executives or our frontline, it's everyone. So Kara's going to talk about how there are smart, capable individuals that are just seemingly, they get lost when that workflow is interrupted, and then they can't seem to, get back into that groove. And we're going to share the evolution of the critical thinking, how, it used to be very different than things are today. And we're going to explain why staff need so much more handholding today. That sink or swim mentality. I know I was, in my earlier career, I was thrown into that. It just doesn't work for people anymore. So we're going to talk about getting around those types of obstacles, how to empower staff to find their own solutions, and then equipping our managers to troubleshoot these with their employees. So just wanted to remind everyone, all of our webinars are recorded. So if you guys want to watch the playback, that'll be available in a couple of days. What did Heidi say? Oh, I love it. But where was I? Yeah. So all of our videos are recorded. You can find those on our YouTube channel. This one particularly will be available in a couple of days, but we do have quite a library in there. If everyone wants to share this with their team members or just go back and view those videos. And then we will have an offer at the end. So be sure to tune in and stay through the whole thing, because we've got a heck of a deal that we're going to be offering here at the end. And Cara, I think that's pretty much it. Oh, if anyone has any questions, I think we figured out the Q&A section. So it's at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to put questions in there as they come along and pop into your head. And then we'll touch base on those towards the end of today's webinar. Cara, over to you.
Fantastic. Yeah, I love it. So Heidi's comment was, I'm not convinced sink or swim worked when it worked. And I would totally agree, Heidi, that a lot of folks were just, pushing people out onto the floor, into their roles and saying, well, just figure it out. I had to figure it out when I was your age or when I was new. And they're just pushing folks out into those roles. And that, my friends, is not working anymore. And let me tell you this, okay, for those of you who have not been to our webinars, I am Cara Soletto. I am a retention guru. That is all I have focused all of my time and energy on, besides being a mom and friend and other things. But at work, all I've done for the last 10 years is focus on, why do people quit? Why do people stay? What do we do to get the employees to not only do their jobs, but like their jobs, or at least not hate their jobs and want to stay at their jobs? So I want to tell you some stories and kind of discuss that evolution of what has happened and how did we get here? How did we get to this state of frustration and some normalities or normalcies that we have put in place that are not normal, okay? And more importantly, they're not sustainable. So for my friends on the call that are senior leaders, executives, really take close attention to this right now, because what we've been doing, A, it's not working, B, it's not going to work, and it isn't going to fix itself. We have to put the right resources, the right leaders, the right tools for leaders, the right time for leaders. We got to put all these things in place in order to get past this skills gap that we're seeing of a lack of critical thinking and that inability to figure it out, okay? So let me share with you some things that happened in our society a long time ago. I cannot believe how long ago 1980 was. In fact, 1980 was before I was born, y'all, and I am 42 years old. So had to think about it for a second. I was born in 1981. And so in 1980 and in that decade, so much changed in our society. And before that, my sister was born in the 70s. I've got she's going to hate that I said that. Anyway, she was born in the 70s. Lots of my friends, neighbors, everybody else, they were born before the 80s. And from what they tell me, they were latchkey kids. That was this generation when the moms finally put their kiddos on the school bus and then went to work. And after school, those latchkey kids came home from school with a key latched around their neck or maybe latched onto their backpack, and they had to come home to an empty house. All right. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, like, of course I know what that is, or I am a latchkey kid. Give me a chat or a comment here if you were a latchkey kid. But what's interesting about this change in our society and that time in our society was that those who were latchkey kids were left to fend for themselves during those few hours after school before the parents got home. So many people tell me they had to make their own snacks or dinner, often on the stove. Some people had microwaves, but that didn't really take hold till the 80s for most families. So they had to use the stove, don't burn down the house. Maybe there's a list of chores left there on the counter that they had to do before the parents got home. You got to do your homework. Without Google, remember, we didn't have the internet, things like that. So they had this tremendous opportunity, these latchkey kids, to figure it out. And I am telling you all, people tell me they were latchkey kids at 8 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old. And can you imagine today? If we had, 7, 8, 9-year-olds coming home from school after school to an empty house by themselves, no, we'd be calling Child Protective Services and saying these parents are neglecting us. Well, the reason that has changed, there's an actual reason here. The reason that changed was in 1980 and in the early 80s, we started to see these 24-hour news networks that came out. Well, what does that mean? Before that, in the 70s and earlier, we only got about 1 hour a night of national television. So it was just the big things that were happening, or not just in our country, but around the world, wars and trouble and problems and those kind of things. Well, once we had the introduction of these 24-hour news networks, that changed everything as far as our exposure and access to news, because they had 24 hours to fill of information. So they started plucking stories. Well, what's going on in Colorado? What's going on in Indiana? What's going on in Texas? What's going on in Florida? All these different places. And that, my friends, is when we finally heard about these horrific stories that hadn't made it all the way to the national news yet. But we heard things about children being kidnapped from their own front yard, young children, 6, 7, 8 years old. And so the parenting mantra flipped. We not only saw that on the news networks, but then TV shows came out like America's Most Wanted and True Crime and different shows that showed us where bad people were still out on the loose or bad things had happened, and it might happen in your community too. So we saw a lot of those parents shift over to this stranger danger mentality. And if you don't believe me yet of how much it changed, you all, by 1990, the federal government had put after-school care funding in place for families who couldn't afford it. So, of course, before that, we had families having nannies and babysitters or, play dates and figuring out places to go, childcare options and things like that. But by 1990, almost every family had access to that after-school funding and after-school childcare. So, what does that mean? Well, that means the people born in the 80s and 90s and now 2000s, okay, all these younger workers that we have that are 40 and under, really, they didn't have that learning experience, that learning opportunity when we were 8, 10, 12 years old. And instead, I'll use the word, I'm not afraid of it, we were coddled, okay? We absolutely were told, now do this, now have this snack. Here, I'll help you. Ooh, don't use a knife. Oh, stove. No, you don't need to use the stove. Just use the microwave so you don't burn down the house, right? Honestly, you guys, I went to college and didn't know how to use a stove. And I remember my roommates making fun of me because they had all learned how to cook and learned how to use the stove. But I was raised by a single mom, and we both didn't cook. And I used the microwave for just about everything. So I just need you to understand that it isn't the workforce's fault that they don't know how to think through problems. They don't know how to troubleshoot. They don't know how to fend for themselves and deal with these issues that arise. And in fact, let me take that a step farther and say, not only do we not know how to deal with it, we're not equipped as younger workers to be able to do that, but also we're afraid. We're scared to death that we're going to make a mistake. And so, well, I just don't want to touch it. I don't want to do anything because I might mess it up and I might get yelled at, or I might do it wrong and things like that. So today I'm going to dive into this a little bit more and talk about not only, the skills and some tactics for troubleshooting, critical thinking, problem solving, those kind of things, but also how do we build that confidence in our team in order to take a risk and to try that out and see if they can solve that problem. So we got to give them the right environment to do that first. We've got to better prepare people for sure as they join our teams through better onboarding and whatnot. But we also need to fill that skill gap and the confidence gap. Okay, so we got to give them the confidence and the competence to do that job. So let me ask you here, are you prepared as an organization to hire, onboard, and continuously train and mentor today's new workforce? Because in a lot of cases, I hear managers that they just say, we don't have time for that. No, I need to just hire better people. Okay, that's the phrase. I just need to hire better people. And here's the other one that I hear that is really tough to do today is, I just need them to hit the ground running, which means I need them to already know how to do the job, which isn't going to happen. Even if you make a lateral hire of somebody who has similar skills from a different business, your business has different systems. Your business has different people you serve. Your business has different staff and different dynamics and things like that. So it's going to be a continuous learning process for folks over a lot more time. Okay. So let me speak to the senior leaders and executives here for just a minute. Are we certain that we have proper workloads in place? Because a lot of our turnover is coming from the staff who come in. They are not getting the proper onboarding and the proper training and mentoring because the managers don't have time to do that. And so sometimes we need to take very realistic looks at our workloads, especially of those managers, to make sure they have time to be managers. Okay, we got to do that. And we need to make sure that our budget has the proper HR team in place and the right resources and enough managers. If you guys remember back in the day, we used to have assistant managers. And so the job could get done and the people could be trained and managed and onboarded. Okay. So we have to look at that new, we've normalized that people are just overloaded all the time. And then companies come to me and say, why is everybody quitting? Well, it's because the new hires don't feel properly supported and properly trained. And sometimes that is going to take not just tweaks, but a large leap over to a different organizational structure and some different job descriptions and updates on those things. Okay. So now, before your new hires run into problems, I'm going to get to some strategies in a minute about troubleshooting and problem solving and whatnot. But as an organization, think about, what can I do before my staff run into problems that I can, kind of head those off and get in front of those things. So often I still hear people saying, well, that's just common sense. I shouldn't have to tell them that, or she should know better. Who doesn't know that? Right? Those are phrases of judgment, you all. And I've got other webinars and other sessions around all of that, of understanding the different generations and reducing your own judgment. But please understand that there's a lot more we can do as managers and as organizations to prepare people to tackle the issues and to learn their job, even because sometimes we want people to kind of teach themselves. And that ain't going to fly, because guess what? They're going to get frustrated and then they're going to quit. And you say, oh, well, I was trying to empower you and put you in these positions, and just let you teach yourself. And they say, no, you set me up to fail. You didn't give me the proper support and training. Okay. So a couple things that we can do right out of the gate: communicating our expectations. For sure. Communicating the unwritten expectations and the written expectations, giving people proper training and coverage on the process. Step 1, step 2, step 3. This is how we do it here, or this is how it needs to be done if you're in a regulated environment, for example, or have even, OSHA or other things that have to be done in a certain way in order to stay compliant, for example. So we want to make sure we're communicating those expectations, both the written processes and procedures and whatnot, but also the unwritten expectations. And that's where a lot of us are we're seeing them miss the mark, is on that unwritten expectation, because not only did we have the latchkey situation where the workers have trouble figuring it out, but they also just don't know what you expect of them. And here's a little secret. You ready? They can't read your mind. So they don't know what you want from them. They don't know how it's always been done. Okay. And if we just use that, they should know better, and that's just common sense, we're just going to continue to be frustrated. They're going to continue to be frustrated, and we're going to continue to see turnover. So, in fact, a couple of years ago, one of our prospects kind of contacted us and said, look, our folks don't even know what professionalism looks like and what it means to kind of figure things out. And we need them to take some more initiative and to be more proactive and to be more positive. And they listed all these different things. And so we created a Hit the Mark professionalism video series. They're just 2-minute quick videos that share whether or not a person, whether or not that person already knows and it's more of a refresher, or maybe they don't know and they need to be exposed to that expectation. All right. So one of those videos that we made is about solutions and offering solutions. So let me share that with you, because you could also, I'm showing this as an example because you can make your own videos. We all have cell phones now and free editing software. So you can make your own videos on how to troubleshoot or how to fix a problem or how to meet that expectation that we want them to meet. Okay. So let me share my screen here real quickly. And just a second. Here we go. All right. And I'm going to share this video with you. One of my first mentors taught me something critical to my success. He said, don't ever bring me a problem without at least one potential solution as an option. He explained to me that when I come to him, my boss, with a problem, that I am actually the person who's closest to the potential solution because I know the whole situation. So he encouraged me to stop coming to him and saying, I have a problem. What do I do about it? And instead say, I have a problem and I've been thinking about potential solutions. Could I get your thoughts or the pros and cons before I move forward? This made me a much better critical thinker as I started to solve my own problems instead of always just running to my boss or even another colleague. So when you run into an obstacle or identify a problem, first, consider possible solutions. Even if you don't have the resources, even if there's an obstacle to that solution, at least brainstorm in your mind some options, some possibilities if you can get the support and the resources that you need to solve that problem. You are most likely the person on the team who's going to come up with the best answer possible. And so, really lean on your boss or your colleagues to just help brainstorm through that. Don't look to them for the final solution. I encourage you to think about the pros and the cons to each possible solution before making that decision if it could have negative consequences one way or another. If you work on this, you will be a great critical thinker and you will be able to navigate and solve your future problems faster. So, that is a way. I'm just showing you all a tiny little example of that 2-minute video of how simple and how basic we have to get with some of our training today, of just helping them understand that, yes, we expect you to solve your own problem. So think about what's in your onboarding and how do you empower staff to solve their own problems as well. Okay. Now there's a delicate balance between you can do it and, I'm not doing it for you. Figure it out. We have to make sure that we don't have that kind of attitude behind it of, well, nobody showed me how to do it when I started here, because that is how we did things in the late 1900s. All right. We don't do that anymore. We cannot put that pressure, that added pressure on people without the support to get them that confidence and competence. Okay. So make sure when I talk about support and, and really empowering people, we have to praise them when they do figure something out. So if anybody says to you, oh, hey, well, I wasn't sure how to do that yesterday, but I looked around and I found this, and I hope that was the right way to do it, or I took care of it, then definitely show them praise. I know that seems silly of like, yay, they did their job. Woo, right? But we do truly have that gratitude within us that, oh, good, they didn't come bother me and they figured it out on their own. So make sure to praise your team members when they do figure those things out on their own. And then continue providing support until they build that confidence over time. Now, you all, this takes months, not weeks or days. So you have to continue to do that. And all of you that are in leadership positions, any kind of supervisor, manager, even executive level, just remember that you need to be a part of this solution. You need to continue to praise and empower folks, not in a negative, you're on your own kind of way, but in a, yes, I'm here to support you, but I want you to give it a try first. Okay. So make sure to create a culture of ongoing coaching with every interaction that you have, where you are praising people for what they've done well, but you're also saying, all right, hey, just so you know, this is how we do this. Wanted to give you some clarification on that. And, you can still give those pieces of advice and fix things and rework together, but don't forget to incorporate that praise as well to show them that, yes, you are still learning the job, but you're doing a great job with what you've learned so far and you're getting there. And I understand it's a tough job and it's going to take time for you to be perfect or never be perfect, but to really get it right. So we have to incorporate that in. Okay. So make sure that you are teaching your managers how to provide real-time feedback, because it used to be the no news is good news. If my boss doesn't talk to me, I'm doing just fine. That's no longer the case. Now it's, if my boss doesn't talk to me a few times a week and tell me that I'm on track and I'm doing okay and I've done a nice job, well, then they hate me and they don't appreciate me and I'm going to quit. So like it or not, we have to shift that side of it as well and make sure that our managers are getting training, right? This past year, we created a real-time feedback class to share exactly that evolution and explain to leaders and train leaders on how to give more real-time feedback on a regular basis with their folks. Okay. So they have to genuinely say, not sarcastically, they have to genuinely ask, what have you done so far to figure it out so that now we can determine where to go next, right? It's like, what have you already tried or thought through? And then I'll help you determine where to go next, or maybe some other options if you haven't found that solution. So again, come at that from support and not talking down to our folks. So, all right, you're ready. You're ready. Okay, Cara, how do we do this? How do we get them to figure it out? What are those skills? Well, these are skills that you don't even realize you have. Okay. A lot of this stuff, whether you were a latchkey kid or your parents just empowered you and encouraged you to figure out your own problems or whatnot, a lot of these methodologies that I'm about to share with you of how to solve a problem, a lot of them you already know how to do. Some of them you do regularly, don't even notice, and others maybe you don't use that one, and that might work for you too. So keep your eyes and ears peeled here as we go through some different problem solving techniques that you can now not only utilize for yourself as a leader, but also help cascade this information and these skills down to our staff and our new team members as well. Okay. So first things first, easy peasy, Google it. All right, Google it. I know that sounds silly, but a lot of times that's how we troubleshoot today is we Google it or we look it up on YouTube, and we're going to try to find a video or an article or an explanation of, has anybody else had this problem? And do they know how to fix it? Because I'm experiencing something I haven't dealt with and I've got to get past that. All right. So one piece of it is Googling and just looking at the resources that you have available. Now, remember, Google doesn't have your company information. So I find a lot of the institutional knowledge and processes and things like that are not in Google. And they'll even say, well, I can't Google it. So where am I supposed to find it? Well, that takes us to number 2, which is search the files. Search the resources that you do have available. Okay. And I'll ask you, as an organization and as a leader of your team, do you have training documents? Do you have processes documented so people can refer back to that instead of bothering you every time? Because you cannot expect people to just know it and remember it from the first time that they told you. In fact, I've had a lot of conversations recently with folks who say, well, at my last job, I got in trouble if I asked twice, because they would say, well, I told you that. Come on now. You all know that new hires have a million things coming at them. New people, new processes, new customers, new this, new that, right? Everything is coming at them in those first few weeks. So just because you told them something or even showed them something, unless you gave them the documentation to say later, when you forget where this is, check the documentation, right? Unless you've given them that kind of tool, be prepared for them to ask questions again. And don't be frustrated by that. Be understanding and say, wow, I know you took in a lot of information when you started here, so I'm happy to show you that one more time. Okay. Make sure to keep your cool in those situations. All right. Also, make sure that your online resources, any kind of shared folders, like if you use Google Drive or SharePoint or whatever it is that you use to save all your company shared documents, make sure it's organized. Make sure it's cleaned up and old crap is out of there, or at least archived, or it's labeled as old. We do that. Sometimes we want to save historical information, but we don't want anybody using an old version. So we will change it to old in the title. So as a manager, I know it seems daunting and time consuming, but if you just tackle away at that little by little, when you get into your folders, just rename some things so that they're more up to date. Put some things in folders instead of just shoving everything in one spot. Make sure that your naming conventions on how you save documents make sense to a new hire. I've worked at places where they called something some weird acronym, and then I never knew where to go find it because I couldn't remember that weird acronym. So make sure things are labeled and that you have that documentation or those resources in place. Okay. So don't set your new hires up for failure as far as that goes, because you know how complicated those files can get. Can you imagine being a new hire that doesn't speak your language and doesn't know where things are? So we could do that better. Now, something else that we can teach them, right? So we've Googled it, we've searched the resources we have. Let's go to trial and error. Okay. I'm finding that a lot of our younger workforce today, in particular, is scared to death to try it and make an error because they've been taught, they've been raised of, you got to get it right and you got to do it right the first time, things like that. So this is great. Trial and error can be great for maybe technical issues of trying to troubleshoot and figure out, well, maybe it's over here, maybe it's over there, that type of thing. Trial and error is also great when it is something that can be done multiple times without causing damage. All right. So that's why the new hires are scared to death of trial and error, is because they don't want to cause damage. And so think about, here's an example for you, drafting any kind of document. That's a great time. You should ideally give that employee, whether they're a new hire or they've been with you forever, you should be giving them the proper prompts and proper, goals and expectations of what you want them to do. But if you want to work on their trial and error skills, you can say, all right, here's a minimal prompt and I want you to take a stab at it. But you have to make sure that's a safe environment to say, look, I don't expect your first draft to be perfect, but I want you to think through it and really just give it a try. Okay. But you have to do that with a project or a document that you have time to then review and revise later, whether you're doing the revisions or you ask them to do it again. Hey, here's some feedback on that. I need you to do it again. This comes back to the workload crisis, because now people say, I don't have time for that. I just need it done and I need it done right the first time. Well, then how are people ever supposed to learn and to be able to build those muscles of critical thinking and problem solving? Okay. So instead, let's give them some projects, give them some opportunities to utilize and practice trial and error, because that is a skill that many of you probably already have, and you're pretty good at it, and you don't realize how naturally that comes because of your past experience. Okay. All right. Another one is the root cause analysis. Okay. Let's think about root cause analysis. What is really the problem? So I had a chief HR officer contact me recently and said, I really need my managers to fix the real problem, not the symptoms. And here was an example that she gave. She said, I've got an employee who came to their supervisor and said, I need my schedule changed for the next 2 weeks because my car broke down and I can't get my car fixed until the next paycheck. And then it's going to be a few days in the shop. So, hey, supervisor, can you change my schedule for the next 2 weeks? And this CHRO was frustrated because the supervisor said, yeah, I can change your schedule for the next 2 weeks, thinking that was the problem, that the person had scheduling problems. It wasn't scheduling problems. What was it? A car problem. It was a transportation problem. Okay. So instead, what we really want a supervisor to do in that situation, because oftentimes in that case, the employee feels like, I can't do anything about my car until I get my next paycheck, right? Where the supervisor, if they had really been thinking critically in that situation, they could have said, look, I can change your schedule for the next day or two, but let's get your car fixed. And this company happened to have, like a lot of companies do, they have those funds that can help employees with, a flat tire or an unexpected bill and things like that. They have a fund set aside for hourly workers who need that support in a time of emergency. Okay. So what we really want the managers to do is think again about what resources are available, especially if it's something the company already offers, instead of trying to make all these phone calls and change schedules for the next 2 weeks. That's a lot of shifts. Okay. Instead of doing that, let's say, how can we get your car fixed faster? What resources do we have? What access? Look at our network. Who can help us get your car fixed faster? Or if we can't fix your car, could you still follow the same schedule if we can get you a ride? on those days, right? Because now, of course, we have Uber and Lyft and things like that. And maybe there's employees who live nearby that other staff member. So we want to get to the root cause of what is really going on. So whether this is you troubleshooting or you're helping a team member, that might be a great question to ask, is to say, what is the real issue here? Not just the symptoms that we're seeing on the front and trying to fix, but what is the real issue that if it were taken care of, then we wouldn't even have these symptoms, especially if it's somebody who, for example, has those car problems often, and maybe they're calling off work because their car won't start and things like that. Maybe getting their car fixed or getting them a new car is not possible, but can we put a backup transportation plan in place for those days when their less than reliable transportation fails on them? Okay, so look at the underlying issues and really try to figure out what's going on that we can help and support and fix, instead of just dealing with those symptoms all the time of, I got to change my schedule. Okay. So that's another tool, the root cause analysis. And then the last one I want to talk about today is this idea from Carol Dweck. You probably are familiar with the growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. I mean, this was huge when she came out with this information, wrote her books, all the things that some people just feel that, well, I don't know how to fix it. I can't fix it. I don't know. Versus other people say, well, I've never had this problem before. I've never solved that yet. That's the key. Okay. My son is really good at math. That's his superpower, is math. All right. He's 9 years old. And he's always been ahead on math, and it's come really easily so far, all the way through most of third grade. Well, now they're doing division. Okay. And so he has hit this point where it just didn't come naturally to him. It wasn't immediately understandable. And so he was telling me, oh, well, Mom, it's too hard. I can't do it. It's too hard. And I am trying to shift his mindset to say, no, buddy, it's just new. And this word yet is so important. In fact, Carol Dweck said it's great for giving confidence to children by saying things like, you just haven't learned it yet. Okay. So the not yet, you don't know how to solve it yet. You've never been in this situation yet that you had to overcome. And that phrase, the not yet phrase, actually builds confidence and encourages children and adults to keep going. All right. To keep going through the difficulty, through the point where they feel, stuck, or they feel dumb, or they just feel that, I don't know what to do. Okay. We can get them past that feeling if we say, it's okay, you just haven't done it yet. All right. So Carol Dweck does a great job in her materials of explaining how that phrase shifts us from that fixed mindset of, it's too hard, I can't do it, I don't know how, over to a growth mindset, which is focused on continuous improvement and continuous learning, that we can all continue growing and learning. And so that phrase alone, that not yet phrase, really can flip us into a growth mindset, which is what we want all of our staff to have. All right. So that's a great tool for getting people over a hump when they feel stuck, or they feel they don't have the tools to get to where you want them to be, or they want to be. All right. So we've got Google it, search the files and resources, trial and error, root cause analysis, focusing on a growth mindset and continuous improvement instead of getting stuck in a fixed mindset. And you all, to be honest, I could go on for days, because there's a lot more types of troubleshooting methods and all of these other tools that we can teach folks. In fact, I'm building right now for 2024 a critical thinking class for managers, for staff as part of our Leadership Essentials series, because we got to dive deeper into this. And that specific training series, the Leadership Essentials classes, focus on skill building, like the real-time feedback of understanding how to give better feedback to our team on a daily basis. Okay. So you have to put these tools in place. If you've got your own training programs, your own onboarding, make sure that you're putting into those training programs both how to give feedback, how to mentor and train the new hires, the better onboarding plans, communicating your expectations, all of those things. All right. So before we wrap up and take some questions here as well, have you done the best job possible to create that effective learning environment? Or are you constantly reprimanding and just telling folks, oh, you did that wrong and this and that? Okay. So we got to have those onboarding plans in place. We got to have the right training for those managers so they know how to properly handle this. We got to have the searchable information in our systems, okay, that's properly organized. And we've got to have time. That, I think, is one of the biggest barriers right now is leaders simply don't have time to stop and mentor their folks and to fill these gaps and to work on these skills that they need, okay? So we can be as frustrated as we want with the new hires and blame them and, well, they don't know how to troubleshoot and they don't know this and that. But guess what? They're not going to learn it unless we, you and me, teach them. It's not just going to come to them over time. It's not going to happen overnight. In fact, they will continue job hopping, looking for a place who will train and mentor them properly. That's what a ton of our new hires out there are actually looking for, is a company that doesn't throw them to the wolves, that doesn't make them sink or swim coming in. Okay. So are we giving the staff that proper training to fill those gaps? Because the schools didn't teach it, the upbringing didn't teach it from different parenting styles. Now, of course, there are some people that you're thinking, oh, well, Joe does it beautifully. Why can't everybody be like Joe? Well, I'm going to guess that Joe was raised on a farm and had chores to do and was given expectations and was told, figure it out and different things like that. So don't try to compare some new hires to other new hires, and instead realize that these gaps exist and we have to fill that gap. Okay. So, sometimes, unfortunately, we say, well, give it a shot. Oh, no, not like that. So we also have to make sure that we're giving them the space for some of those mistakes and that trial and error time. Okay. So are you giving them the tools to know how to do their job? You're giving them even computer skills. I've been surprised recently to learn that a lot of the new hires, they have basic computer skills, but they don't know business software. They're not going to know the specific industry software and maybe even the Microsoft products and things like that, email systems, Word, PowerPoint, Excel. They've only had maybe school access to those kinds of systems and processes or software, and they don't know how to use it in the business world. So you may have to fill in some of those gaps as well, and don't make assumptions. All right. So give your folks the tools, the time, the confidence to stay positive and make sure that even if they make mistakes, that you're supporting them. Okay. So this is not an easy fix. It's not an easy fix. I wish that, in this 1 hour, I could give you all the silver bullet and just do this and then poof, all these issues will go away, but it's going to take time. And it all ties back to retention, my friends. So if you don't have retention problems, then maybe this isn't an issue for you. But if you've got folks who are quitting, especially newer hires, especially younger folks that seem to be getting frustrated, this might be that skill that's missing that we can help fill that gap in order to keep them longer. Okay. So